Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. I am Frances Schefter with Schefter Law PA. I am the host of this show, and I am so excited to have Erik Feig with Feig Mediation on today, which all of you are probably saying, mediation? What does that have to do with IEPs? Why is he going to be helpful for us? So Erik, to start off, please tell us, what do you do and how can you assist families with neurodiverse children?
Hi, Francis. Thank you for having me. What do? I'm a mediator for parents and for families. And what this means is that I help the people work through their differences when important decisions are on the line. I happen to be an attorney by background, but as a mediator, my role is different. I'm not acting as an advocate, I'm not acting as an advisor, a therapist. My role is really to help people work through issues that might be difficult for them to discuss, may be too much for them to break down, or where they may disagree, so that they can hopefully create ways to say yes to each other when they might otherwise get stuck on no. And I'll say, as a parent of 3 neurodiverse children, I have a special focus on working with parents and families like mine. It's why I created this practice. It's where the added complexity of, additional medical, educational support decisions, school issues, sharing the load, all of that, or even separation and divorce can be complicating factors in the mix.
Right. So there doesn't have to be a case or anything. It's just you're having a hard time communicating. Your husband's frustrating you. Your wife is frustrating you. You're totally opposite ends of the spectrum on what you should do medically or school related with an IEP.
Mm-hmm.
That's when people should call you and you can help sort it all out.
Look, if you've ever had to deal with the stress of having unresolved issues, even small ones, when you're not on the same page, can grow into big issues and they can affect everything in the family. The related point on that is how you come together or how you disagree can matter sometimes as much as what you're disagreeing about. So what I do is I'm there to help people when they get stuck, to help them get unstuck.
That's awesome. Where is that? So I know you've been doing this for a little bit. What's the biggest communication issue you see with parents?
It's a great question. And it's a hard question to answer because, every family, every dynamic is different. But maybe let's take a couple of examples. The first one, which I talk about all the time, that can make communication difficult is when we're giving presentations to each other instead of having conversations. When there's an important issue to address, I do this myself. Look, if we have something important to talk about, let's say it's myself and my wife, I am thinking about that well in advance. I'm planning out how the conversation is going to go. I'm anticipating reactions. I'm thinking about what she might say to me, and I'm lining up all of my arguments about why what I'm proposing to do or what I'm thinking is the right way to go. She's probably doing the same thing. So by the time we actually get to speak to each other, we've had this conversation in our minds 5 times, 10 times, 25 times. It's hard. It's hard to be present. It's hard to be listening to each other instead of trying to make our case about who's going to win in those moments. That's a big one, I find. The other,
It's interesting that you say that. I was before law school, when I was in my teaching stage of my life, I actually got selected for jury duty.
Mhm.
And when we went back for deliberations, I made the mistake of saying, okay, so who wants to be foreman? And everybody said, you. And we got to the point that half the room was saying negligent, half the room was saying not negligent. And there was a battle. And
Mhm.
finally, after a break, I came in and I said, you know what? I keep hearing the words, we're right, you're wrong, we're right, you're wrong. That's not where we are. That's not what we need to be. We need to find that middle ground. And as soon as I said that and we all sat down and looked at all of the facts again, we wind up all agreeing on one way, which was so nice to get out of that. I'm right and I have to be right.
I think that's such an important point, Francis, and it's one that happens all the time. It's hard when we're doing it for ourselves. right? And I think that's part of the difficulty is we're thinking, and this is natural, it's an or, right? My way or your way.
Right.
It's not that we disagree and have different points of view. That's the issue. It's that challenge of being able to build a connection, build a bridge between that disagreement to say, okay, what you're proposing or what you're thinking, that has merit. So does what I'm thinking. Now, can we look at this together and instead of saying it's my way or your way, look at it a little differently, step back and be able to say, okay, how do we make this an and get the most out of for both of us what we're trying to accomplish? It can change the whole dynamic of the conversation.
I can see that. It's got to be amazing. And how does family dynamics play into everything? You know, that there's more than one child, all of that. You know, is there an area for whole family communication that might come into play?
We all bring our family dynamics with us. We bring our mileage, our history. We're all carrying baggage, whatever form that might take. So that's going to play into our communication styles, the way we engage with each other, or even don't engage. Think of people who might be more conflict averse. Again, let's not talk about that. That's hard, right? Or where let's just keep doing it the way we've always done things, and find that the way we've always done things makes one family member, let's say one spouse, might feel like they're carrying more than their fair share of the load. All of that could play in. And then I think when you're talking about neurodiversity, that adds, again, it adds another layer of complexity to the mix because if you're thinking in terms of processing, the way we're able to experience the world, the way we hear things, all of that can play into the family dynamic. It can play into whether we're connecting with each other. You and I are having a conversation right now. What you're hearing may not be what I think I'm saying to you. You may be hearing it differently. So how do we connect that? I think that's
Right.
all that's all part of it.
When I practiced family law in Florida before moving back up here, it was always there's three sides to every story.
Hmm.
You know, his, hers, and the truth. You know, so somewhere in between. And this is a little different. His, hers, and what it's finding that middle ground of what we meant. Because I know with my husband, often he'll say something, I'll say something else, and I'm like, but that's not what I said. And it's just he hears it differently because of his family dynamics and his upbringing. And that can be
That,
so challenging.
that's it. And being able to check in with each other, being able to slow down. Look, we all keep a lot of plates spinning at the same time. So to be able to slow down and have those conversations in a way where we're not just reacting to each other. Think of, how many times you say, why don't you understand me? Right? Why aren't you getting this?
Right.
I thought I'm being clear. I don't want to have to say it again. Well, if you're saying the same thing over and over and the person you're speaking with isn't hearing you, right? They're hearing the words, but they're not hearing the message. That's a sign that you're missing each other and that maybe you're communicating in a way that isn't effective. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It means that it's just not working. So it's how do you change that up?
And I love right. And I love how you say that. It's not one is right and one is wrong. Our brains work differently. And however we communicate and interact, and even, male, female, 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 male, all of us, because we bring our past into it and we work differently and we think differently.
That's exactly it. We can both be right from our points of view. And very often we are.
Right.
Look, going back to, as an attorney, as a negotiator for a long time, I used to teach people, the person sitting across the table from you isn't necessarily wrong, but they have a different perspective. So the question is what do you do with that? Right? It's win lose, right? I'm going to win, you're going to lose, you're going to win, I'm going to lose. Or maybe there's a chance to change that up and say, let's see how maybe we both can create something better.
Right. That's awesome. Do you have are there like a top five or top three pointers for families of how they can help communicate better?
There's some tips. I just did a video on this recently that is up on my YouTube channel. But here's a couple to think about. One is slow down. That's probably one of the most important. Everything is moving quickly. We're busy. We're handling logistics. We're handling our own stuff. Yes, as parents, our stuff is in the mix too. Right? There's lots of ways that we can, that we can be stressed out during the day, and then having conversations that are important or that really require us to, to be present. That can be hard if you're doing it while you're multitasking or while it's thrown in at the end of doing something else, or it's the quick phone call from the car, for instance. That's not serving us. And I believe being able to slow down and then create that time when we could focus. Okay, we have something important to talk about. Maybe it's a school decision, right? Maybe it's something in the home. Maybe it's something related to parenting. Maybe it's some a financial, whatever it is. Maybe a financial decision. Whatever the issue is, set aside some time. Doesn't have to be a lot. It has to be enough, and use that time to focus. And then what I would say is the tip that goes along with that is have some structure. And that'll look different for everybody. But take the time to plan out, what are we going to talk about? Are we planning to talk about and have the same conversation with each other? If you and I are talking and your agenda for that conversation is entirely different than mine, it'd be nice to know, right?
That makes
We,
sense, right? But wait, I thought we were talking about X and you're talking about Y. How did that happen?
exactly, exactly. And then what goes along with that is, what are we trying to accomplish, right? Each one
Right.
of these are opportunities for us to ask each other questions, right? And to be able to check in with each other. And that's really the other piece that comes along, is checking in with each other. I'm saying this, are you hearing that? Or the other way, when you said that, active listening is sometimes what it's called, reflective listening. When you said that, this is what I heard. Is that right? Is that what you meant? Yes or no? You have an opportunity to say yes or no. If it's no, then I can ask the question, what did I miss? Can you help me? Right?
Right.
And then ask you, when all that, is there more? Is there more that you want to make sure that I'm hearing from you? Being able to slow down and do that in a mindful way can change the meaning. It can change the whole intention of a conversation.
It's so, yeah. I mean, I'm now thinking about it and applying all of this to an IEP meeting, as one thing parents, but then when you're at the table with all the professionals,
Hmm.
um, as a parent, sometimes it's overwhelming. And but I know there's been times at IEP meetings where I need to remind somebody because the school will say something about, well, we disagree. And I'm like, and I understand that and we disagree, but let's look at the child and the
Hmm.
data and what it says, and then see where we are on getting the child the services the child needs. It's
Yeah.
amazing how that changes things.
Yeah. And being able to, instead of reacting, I would say, because that's the first impulse, is we hear a no and we react to the no, right? And we're
Right.
responding to that. Being able to slow it down and ask the questions to say, what's sitting under that no? What got you there? What's important to you? You might find that the no is only the tip of the discussion, and that there's a lot of room for agreement behind that. But if you can't get past focusing on what you're on the no, the surface, it's much more difficult, right? Then you're back to that win lose. Am I going to change your mind or not? Are you going to change my mind or not?
Right. I did one of my videos on basically don't take no. It was the Schefter way because that was my father's thing. If the person you're talking to says no, take it up the ladder. When it comes to professional, I do the same thing with schools. Okay, well, you're
Hmm.
saying no, but either what does the rest of the team think, or is there somebody above you that can make this different, and
Sure,
can make a different decision for us?
sure. I think these are all great strategies. And in my space, let's say I'm working with parents, the question is a no. Let's say you have a yes and a no, right? Let's say, for instance, it's a question about a treatment, a medication, some supports that might be needed for school. You have one yes, you have one no. That's an opportunity to explore with each other. And that can be very difficult to do, I find, without some help.
Yeah, I'm thinking my husband and I, when we get in our, like whichever it is, we're in our positions, we both think we're right. And it's hard to be able to see. the
Yeah.
gray sometimes, because it's like, okay, they say, you have one parent says yes to an IEP, one parent says no. Well, how do you can't have a half an IEP. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you meet that? So that's
Yeah.
where you come in, right?
It's being able to get it all on the table, right? Daylight being the best disinfectant, right? You're able to talk about it, but it's once you get the big picture. What are you looking at? What am I looking at? Now let's both step back and look at it together. That can be very difficult to do, right? And it takes a certain amount of time, and it goes back to that point of speed. We want to do it quick. We don't have time. This is urgent. It is hard to slow down and to do that. And when
Yeah,
you're doing it, and I'd say where focusing on the speed, it's when you're going quickly, you're not bringing your A game. Most people are not.
that
So
makes sense.
it gives you the chance for things to actually it can engage your creativity, your problem solving. Sometimes I call it tactical problem solving. It's applied problem solving. It's a structure that lends itself to being able to do that.
So I'm thinking it's how I always say, like in my videos, I say, don't wait to bring an education attorney until there's an issue, because
Hmm.
then it's more difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's the same thing with you, is when you're in a stressful time, don't discuss it without you. It's kind of like, call Eric, he'll work it out for you. Make it happen.
Well, what I tell people is the best time to talk is before, to talk with me or someone like me, and probably you had the same conversation. The best time to talk to us is before you need to talk to us, right? It's preventive, and I love that you describe it that way. Prevention, how to avoid the conflict by getting in front of it. I think that can be an enormous tool to help reduce stress.
Right. And so, if people are having an issue or not having an issue, just,
Mhm.
husband, wife, whatever, um, can you help them put tools in place so that when there is an issue, they know how to communicate better without having to come to you for every single issue the marriage has?
I think the process itself lends a foundation for doing that. It creates that foundation because you're problem solving together. Yes, it's supported. Yes, it's with help. Yes, it's with structure, but they're tools that you could bring home, right? You're not going to come to someone like me or come to me for every issue. But as you do it and you build the confidence and the experience of working together, that accrues, right? The
Right.
more practice you have working on things together instead of doing it in an adversarial way, hopefully that helps to shift the process, help shift the baseline, right, to one where you're doing it and you're applying it in your own life.
Right. And then the fact that you have neurodiverse children, you have that perspective. I know that often for me as a special ed attorney, the fact that I have a child with an IEP and the teaching experience is huge,
Yep.
because it's a very different mindset when you're a parent of a child with a neurodiverse child to teach, and so how does that differ how do you think that adds to what you teach families?
Look, it's again, it comes into the mix. The neurodiversity is why I created my practice in the first place. We have so many amazing supports for our kids. We have so many terrific supports in that same line between parents and children. There's far fewer that are available, I think, at the parent-parent level to help keep us as parents in step with each other, and by extension, to help keep the family on track and make it less stressful. Look, if the parents are having these disagreements that then don't get resolved, that can filter down to the whole family in lots and lots of ways. And especially when you're dealing with all of this added complexity of neurodiversity and what that takes to support, it can get complicated very quickly and it can get charged and personal very quickly when you disagree. So having more supports that can take the stress level down, I think is a good thing.
And the parents learning the communication skills through modeling their teaching their children.
Absolutely. Look, teaching them again healthy ways to disagree, healthy ways to work things out. That's all for the good. That's all good.
Right. And which is even more important for our neurodiverse children that might be struggling with their social skills.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important point, Francis, because when you have children who might be rigid thinkers, inflexibility, where those types of issues are in the mix, when there's reactivity, social emotional challenges, behavioral challenges, being able not only to model, but then to be able to practice with them all of those skills and show them how it works, right? That all of that can be helpful to them and can open their eyes over time. It's not an instant solution. These are all works in progress. We're works in progress. These are all skills to be practiced. And the more that we're able to bring that into the home, I think that will again that can bring the tone down and hopefully lead things to being on a better path.
Right. And not all the emotional charge and the passion when we get upset with each other, the way of putting it.
Passion is a good thing when we get upset, but it's what you do with it.
Right.
We care. We're invested. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how it's expressed, right? And then
That
once you're
makes
feeling
sense.
that way, how are you going to direct it? Right? Are you going to
Right.
direct it into something productive or something that's not going to serve you well? Those are the choices along the way.
Right. That makes sense. Do you also, like, we're talking a lot about parents and how parents can communicate with each other. Do you bring whole families in and work with, the whole family in figuring out ways to communicate?
My focus is really on the parents when it comes to these types of issues because I view it again as and we have other resources that are available for the whole family. We have other resources that are available for the children. My piece, so to speak, and where I'm really focusing is the parent aspect and being able to provide that support there. That
Which
doesn't it
totally
doesn't
makes
rule
sense.
yeah it doesn't rule out the larger perspective, but the work is generally between the two parents.
And that totally makes sense because if when you bring the family in, it becomes now the child might be the center again, and
Right.
and as a parent, sometimes we need our own space and feel like it's our own safe space and that it's just ours, right?
It's a space where they can have these conversations. It's a space where they could step back and deal with these issues with each other. So what I'm doing is I'm facilitating that conversation. I'm facilitating that process, giving them that structure, those bumpers, if you will, so that they can have those conversations in a way that's more constructive.
Right. And you're not a therapist.
No,
Right.
no.
I think that's important because I know, when talking to other friends and stuff, when, communication issues with our husbands or whatever, they're like, yeah, my husband won't go to therapy. That's okay. It's not therapy. Let's go to this great guy that teaches you how to talk.
You come to me with issues. You come to me with this, whether it's a disagreement, but these are issues to be addressed. It's narrow. The focus is narrower. And where you're going to focus with me, where a therapist might focus more on the why questions. I'm focusing first on the what questions in terms of what are we talking about, and then how do we get there? We being how do you have the conversation that's going to help you reach the goals, the objectives, and address the concerns, the interests, the values, and all the things that you want to bring into the mix and bring to the table. So it's more that, again, it's narrower in scope. It's also narrower in time. When you're done and you've come to whatever your conclusion is on those decisions or those issues might be, the process is over. You can come back in 6 months when you have another, let's just say, or a year, but it's a narrower scoped process and it's limited in time for those reasons. So I think there are some important differences. Can it be
Right.
therapeutic? Sure, absolutely, but it's not therapy.
Right. No, that's great. That's a good point. It's like you're literally coming once to work out the one issue. However, just think of how, and I'm just thinking back of like how many times there's an issue and we fight about it for weeks.
Yeah.
And, whereas, okay, let's just call Eric, come in, see him, and you're done in a day or a couple hours, however
It might,
long.
yeah, it's however long it takes, and it's voluntary. So there's no arm twisting.
Right.
I'm not pushing a result one way or the other. It's your discussion. If you're coming to work with me, it's your conversation. You're the experts on your issues. What I'm there to do is help you to get it on the table and then to make those decisions about what you want to do with it and where you want to go.
Right. That makes sense. And then how long are sessions? They only book an hour? Do they plan for 2 to 3 hours? How does that work?
Usually a session is 2 hours at a time. What I find is less than that, and again, that's not a hard and fast rule, but 2 hours is a good time to get things out, to be able to get a rhythm going, and to really roll up our sleeves and get work done. More than that can be tiring. 2 hours of focused time, that's a good chunk of time. And for some people, that might be a little bit much. So that's why I say there's flexibility, but the baseline, we start with 2 hours, but then I'm willing to work with whatever really is the most comfortable and going to be the most productive way of approaching the process.
Right. That makes sense. And so do you offer like a free consultation to determine that? Like, how do people get in touch with you? How do they find you? What's your process of getting into that room with the spouse?
Sure. We start with a free consultation. It's about 20 minutes long, and really that's an opportunity to talk about the process. Many people who come to me, they either don't know much about mediation, they know they need help, right? But they don't know much about what mediation is, what the process looks like. So it gives us a chance to talk about that, to ask those initial questions, to talk about what it might look like, and then make that decision of if this feels right, now let's start the process itself. So we go from there. But it begins with that. And usually it comes into me either as an email, it can come through my website, which is, we can give that information. It's feigmediationgroup.com. I have an email for that or a phone call. Any of these ways can initiate the process, and then we figure out what's going to be the best fit within how I do things.
That makes sense. And then do you suggest both parents call or just one for the consultation? How do you find that it works best?
It's a great question, and it's a great point. My recommendation is that we have that consultation with both parents. We can do it individually. Having it with both parents and being able to have the questions be asked together and them hear the answers together, I think is very helpful. I think also another piece about my role is I'm neutral. I don't take sides. I'm not advocating for one person over the other. And sometimes, if you have one parent initiating the contact, you might have another parent saying, well, that sounds like that's your person.
Mm.
And when tensions are high, that can make things more complicated to deal with. So for me, I think the easiest is we have the conversation together, and the work we're doing in the room is together.
That
So
makes sense.
so it gives a chance to hear each other whenever possible.
Right. And you say in the room with, well, now that hopefully things are opening up again, but in the COVID world, are you still doing in person? Are you only doing Zoom? How, or
I'm
whichever they prefer?
I'm still virtual. We may move to in person in the future. So in the room, I should have said in the virtual room, I suppose. But yeah, it's by Zoom.
And
I
it
think
works
that
just as well, you think?
it works just fine. And one of the things I appreciate about doing it by Zoom is it gives you the opportunity to do this process from where you're comfortable, right? You're not coming to a place that isn't familiar. You're doing it. It could be from your living room. It could be from, a dining room table. And by virtue of that, again, it makes it hopefully a little easier to engage. And when you take breaks, because we do take breaks during the process, being able to walk around in a place that's familiar to you, and go make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, for instance, I think that just helps.
That makes sense. I like that because it's, kind of like you're in an office, you're learning your techniques here, and then you
Yeah.
take it home. How does it apply? And sometimes it's just a different, it's just a different thought process. Whereas you're learning it in your surroundings, it's so much easier. Like, this is where I learned it. This is where I do it. I can
Yeah,
see that.
And taking the commute out of it is helpful too. Look, if you
Right.
think if you think nothing is less than 20 minutes or a half hour by the time you drive somewhere, you get set up, you transfer, you're adding another hour to the mix. Taking that hour
Right.
back, I think, can make scheduling easier. It could take some of the stress of that and the pressure. Again, we're all busy.
Yeah.
We're all managing the logistics for the family and for ourselves. I'd rather
And an
have that
hour's
hour.
right. And an hour's a lot of time.
Yeah,
Although there are times that I think of commuting as, my me time because I can listen to my podcasts, I can listen to books, I can, just
yeah.
talk on the phone with friends, where you don't always get to do, but I can definitely see it's much easier to not have to travel places.
Look, when you're trying to coordinate two calendars, let's say two spouses, two partners, that hour for each person can make a big difference,
It's
right?
huge.
Blocking out that time can be the difference between, being able to do this and saying maybe next week or maybe in 2 weeks while you're still having the issue.
Right. And that makes sense. Makes it so much easier. So you mentioned before you have a YouTube channel. Is it live yet? Can people find it or
It is live. It is live. It is new. I'll be adding to it regularly, but it's under Feig Mediation Group. It's searchable, so it can be found. I don't know if we're able to put a link up, but I have it on my website, so it can be found through there.
got it? Well, we have your Feig mediation group is on the video, so at least
Okay.
there's that. I'm not sure. I think
Hmm.
maybe when it posts, we can comment on and put a link. This is just my second show, so I'm still learning everything we can do. But that's great. So then basically people should just throw Feig mediation group into Google and they should find you and find your YouTube channel and
Yep. You can find me
everything
there.
else.
You can find me on Facebook. We have a page there as well where we're posting our videos, we're posting tips, where I'm posting, information that hopefully will be helpful again to people who can use this type of information, this type of guidance.
Right. Adding to our support system. Families with neurodiverse children, we can never have too much support.
We're all doing the best we can. We're all
Right.
works in progress. And the more that we can do to help support each other and help things stay on track, I think those are all good things.
Definitely agree. So thank you so much, Erik. I loved having you on my show. I think that like, this was great. I learned a lot. Like it's great. I'm like thinking, maybe my husband and I need to come call you, just, because it's true. Like we all have these issues, no matter how well we're trained. My husband jokes around and says he doesn't bother to argue with me because I'm an attorney, so he knows he'll never win. Which is information for me. If he feels that way, that's not necessarily a good thing. And so maybe we need some pointers on how to communicate so he feels he wins sometimes.
Look, and that's the difficulty sometimes. And it's for all of us, right? It's being able to do this, and we're all doing our best.
Right.
I do believe that, and
Yeah.
all the skills and all the rest. The more that we're able to engage with each other instead of at each other, it leaves room for us to have better outcomes.
Right. That is true. So thank you again. And to my viewers, thank you so much for watching us, Stress Free IEP. Um, as always, if you loved having Erik, if you can think of other topics, if you think, hey, wait, have Erik back on something else or somebody else you would like to have on my show, please feel free to comment, shoot me an email, whatever, and let us know. We are excited to get information and help support us, our families that we know need the support. So
Thanks so much
thank
for
you.
thanks so much for having me. You're doing great work. This is really
Thank you.
important.
Thank you.